Deep within the mist-covered valleys of the Appalachian Mountains lies a mystery that challenges everything we've ever been taught about the origins of North America. It is a story buried beneath centuries of silence, a secret written not in stone or parchment, but in the very blood of a people who have endured the rise and fall of nations. The Cherokee, one of the most storied and enduring tribes in America, have long been celebrated for their resilience, culture, and wisdom. But hidden in their DNA lies something far older, far more mysterious, and far more controversial than anyone expected. For generations, scientists believed the story of the first Americans was simple and conclusive. Yet when the DNA of the Cherokee people was tested, the results were so astonishing that many wished they had never been uncovered. What they revealed was not just a scientific anomaly, but a revelation that could rewrite the very history of the continent itself. So, who were the Cherokee really? And what secret within their blood has been quietly erased from America's history books? For most of the 20th century, anthropologists told one version of human migration into the Americas, a theory known as the land bridge hypothesis. According to this view, all Native Americans descended from a small group of migrants who crossed from Siberia into Alaska during the last ice age, around 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. This migration supposedly left a clear genetic trail. Every Native American, it was said, could be traced to one of four maternal DNA groups, known as haplogroups A, B, C, and D, with a fifth, X, added reluctantly years later. These haplogroups tied indigenous ancestry squarely to Asia. But that clean, predictable story began to crumble when researchers began testing descendants of the Cherokee Nation. Instead of finding only the Asian-linked haplogroups, scientists uncovered a surprising pattern, a high presence of haplogroups T, J, U, H, and X. These weren't Siberian at all. They were Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and North African. In other words, the Cherokee carried ancient maternal lineages connected to regions thousands of miles away, Egypt, the Levant, even the Berber populations of North Africa. The implications were staggering. If these DNA signatures were ancient, predating European colonization, then transoceanic contact must have occurred long before Columbus ever sighted land. The discovery struck at the very foundations of accepted American history. Among the Cherokee bloodline studied, one name caught the public's attention more than any other: Elvis Presley, the "King of Rock and Roll." Elvis often spoke of his Cherokee and Jewish heritage, a family story passed down through generations. His maternal line traced back to a woman remembered as White Dove, a full-blooded Cherokee, and to Nancy Burdine, said to be of Jewish descent. When genetic testing confirmed Elvis's maternal haplogroup as B, a Native American lineage, it validated that part of his ancestry, yet his family history still contained strong Old World roots. He honored both sides of his identity, wearing a Star of David and placing Jewish symbols on his mother's grave. To the Cherokee DNA researchers, Elvis's story became more than trivia. It symbolized the interwoven threads of heritage, how the past of one people could ripple across oceans and centuries, connecting unexpected cultures in ways that defy ordinary explanation. The deeper the research went, the more questions it raised. Families throughout the Cherokee Nation displayed genetic markers that conventional models couldn't account for. Was it possible that ancient Mediterranean sailors, Phoenicians, Hebrews, or North Africans, had crossed the Atlantic long before the age of exploration? Could remnants of their journeys have mixed with indigenous peoples, leaving behind subtle traces in their descendants' DNA? Some researchers even suggested that the Cherokee might hold genetic echoes of the lost tribes of Israel, or that their ancestors had contact with forgotten maritime civilizations capable of transatlantic travel. Mainstream academia largely dismissed such theories as pseudoscience. Yet the persistence of these foreign haplogroups within isolated Cherokee lines remains one of genetics' most perplexing anomalies. Whether coincidence, migration, or something more mysterious, one thing is certain: the Cherokee genome carries within it a whisper from distant shores, one that refuses to be silenced. For the Cherokee, this revelation adds a complex new layer to their story. Their people are deeply rooted in the rivers, ridges, and valleys of the Appalachians, yet their DNA speaks of faraway lands. This dual heritage is not a contradiction but a testament to endurance. Across centuries of forced removals, disease, and cultural erasure, the Cherokee survived. Now, their bloodlines reveal not only survival, but a connection to some of humanity's oldest civilizations. Today, Cherokee communities are reclaiming their heritage with renewed strength. Their endangered language is being taught again in schools. Their traditional songs and ceremonies are recorded, their legends retold. The revelation of the DNA mystery has given these efforts new meaning, showing that Cherokee identity is not bound by borders or time. Their story is not merely one of loss, but of ancient global connection, proof that history is far older and far wider than we were ever told. Long before DNA could speak, the Cherokee carried their origins in oral stories. Two major theories have guided historians. The first claims that the Cherokee migrated south from the Great Lakes region thousands of years ago, bringing the Iroquoian language with them into the Appalachian Mountains. Ethnographer James Mooney, in the late 1800s, recorded these tales directly from Cherokee elders. The second theory suggests the opposite, that the Cherokee had always lived in the southeast, and that their culture developed there over countless generations. Archaeological evidence supports this, pointing to mound-building societies that flourished long before written records. During the Middle Woodland period, 200 to 600 CE, early Cherokee ancestors built ceremonial earthworks like the Biltmore Mound near modern Asheville, North Carolina. By the Mississippian era, 1000 to 1500 CE, their towns had evolved into complex political and religious centers. Whether migrants or natives, one fact remains unshakable: the Cherokee presence in the Appalachians runs deep, carved into the soil long before colonization. When 19th-century writer John Howard Payne visited Cherokee territory, he documented stories passed down by the elders, accounts of a time when Cherokee society was guided by two great councils. The White Organization, composed of spiritual elders, presided over peace, healing, and sacred ceremonies. Opposite them stood the Red Organization, the warriors who defended their people. Legend tells that in time, corruption crept into the priestly class, known as the Anikatani, leading to an uprising that dismantled the old order. Religious power shifted from heredity to personal ability. Spiritual leadership became a calling, not a birthright. Out of this transformation emerged one of the most remarkable achievements in indigenous history, Sequoyah's syllabary. In the 1820s, Sequoyah devised a written form of the Cherokee language. At first, it was used only by spiritual leaders to record sacred knowledge. Soon, it spread across the nation, allowing the Cherokee to preserve their stories, medicine, and prayers in their own words. It was a triumph of intellect and spirit, one that proved that Cherokee civilization had its own scholars, its own inventors, and its own history of enlightenment long before outside influence arrived. The first European intrusion came in 1540, when Hernando de Soto led his Spanish expedition through the Cherokee homelands. What began as exploration quickly turned catastrophic. The Spaniards carried more than weapons, they brought disease. Waves of smallpox and influenza swept through communities with devastating speed. Villages that had stood for centuries were emptied within months. A second expedition under Juan Pardo in 1567 ended in violence when local tribes rose against Spanish garrisons, killing nearly all station soldiers. The Cherokee and their neighbors made one thing clear: they would not be conquered easily. Yet the contact left scars that would never fully heal. By the time English and American settlers began to expand into Cherokee territory, their numbers had already been diminished by epidemics from a world they had never seen. The 19th century brought the Cherokee their darkest trial. By the 1830s, gold had been discovered on their lands in Georgia, sparking a wave of greed and violence. Despite the Cherokee adopting written laws, schools, and farms, the U.S. government sought to remove them under President Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act. In 1832, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Worcester v. Georgia that the Cherokee Nation was sovereign and beyond the reach of state law. But the ruling was ignored. By 1838, federal troops began rounding up Cherokee families. Forced westward under brutal conditions, thousands perished from hunger, exposure, and disease. The survivors called it Mvina Dalat Svai, the trail where they cried. It was one of the darkest episodes in American history. Yet even in exile, the Cherokee rebuilt. They carried not only their suffering but their songs, their prayers, and their language into the new land. In traditional Cherokee society, women stood at the center of life. They owned the land, raised the crops, and passed down clan lineage. They were both life-givers and lawmakers, shaping the social and spiritual balance of the nation. When European influence spread through missions and trade, these roles were challenged. Foreign ideals of patriarchy and civilization sought to reshape Cherokee families. Yet through centuries of cultural erosion, Cherokee women remained the keepers of memory. They preserved the stories, the ceremonies, and the knowledge that define the nation even today. Their strength became the bridge between what was lost and what was preserved, between the ancient and the modern. After enduring forced relocation and civil division, the Cherokee people began again in Indian Territory, what would later become Oklahoma. They established a new government, schools, and a written constitution. Yet by the early 1900s, U.S. laws attempted once again to dissolve tribal sovereignty, dividing communal lands into private allotments. For decades, the Cherokee government was suppressed, and chiefs were appointed rather than elected. The people who had once governed one of the most advanced native nations in America were reduced to tokens within a system of control. Then came renewal. In the 1930s, federal reforms allowed tribes to reorganize. The Cherokee held their first democratic elections in nearly a century. By 1975, a new constitution restored their government. And in 1985, Wilma Mankiller became the first woman elected principal chief, a moment that symbolized both progress and return. The Cherokee had not only survived, they had reclaimed their power, their voice, and their dignity. Today, the Cherokee Nation stands strong, numbering hundreds of thousands across the United States. Their culture, once nearly erased, thrives again. But the DNA mystery still lingers, whispering that the Cherokee story may stretch far beyond the known timelines of American history. Are the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern lineages ancient remnants of pre-Columbian contact? Could the Cherokee carry in their blood the last echoes of forgotten voyages that crossed the Atlantic millennia ago? No matter what science ultimately proves, the Cherokee DNA story reminds us that history is never complete. The past is not a straight line, but a living network of connections, crossing oceans, cultures, and centuries. The Cherokee people carry that network within them, the memory of their mountains, the strength of their survival, and perhaps, the blood of civilizations that time itself tried to erase. Their story is not merely one of mystery, it is one of endurance, identity, and the unbroken chain of human history.